doing this show for a long time now, more than 600 episodes. I don't know if there's ever been a show I've looked forward to more than this one. Looking back on the gigantic performance, and how else can you say it, for the Dogs on the start of the early signing period, laying waste to the rest of the SEC and virtually all of college football. A huge collection of five-star names, laying a foundation for a tremendous level of success on the field in the future for the Dogs. Let's talk about it all as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You know, we are only a couple of days before Christmas, and obviously Christmas is a time of sort of good cheer and peace on earth, goodwill towards men. So the right thing to do today is just to talk about all of the good things that Georgia did on National Signing Day, or the start of the early signing period, just to talk about how good things are for Georgia. And the wrong thing to do today would be to focus in on the panic and the nastiness and the negative comments coming from Georgia's rivals. That would be the wrong thing to do today. But I'm going to do it anyway, because I will admit, I hate to sound petty here. This is a bad thing to say so close to Christmas. Santa Claus may hear me say this. I hate to say this, but part of the fun for me in watching Georgia make just a gigantic leap up to the nation's #1 recruiting class, part of the fun for me is watching how sort of negative and miserable this is for a lot of the Georgia rivals and a lot of those fan bases that, listen, you know, I grew up in the late 80s. That's when I was a child. I was a high school kid and a college kid during the 90s. There were a lot of Georgia rivals having a lot of fun at Georgia's expense back then. It was Auburn in those late 80s. It was Tennessee and Florida for most of the 90s. And, you know, they would turn Georgia into the butt of a joke from time to time. Ain't none of them laughing today, if you don't mind the bad grammar here, as Georgia brings in five-star after five-star and then tacks on some surprises after everyone thought they were probably done and literally left no doubt about who the dominant recruiter is in the SEC right now, and frankly probably in all of college football. And Georgia fans are noticing that. Georgia rivals also noticing that as well. Let me give you a few of examples of what people are saying here, and then we'll hear from Kirby Smart himself. I thought this one Auburn fan on the message board had a perfect example of just how scary the rise of the Georgia Bulldogs might be given the success that it had in recruiting yesterday. This fan's message board post said, "I think we need to further our recruiting footprint outside of Georgia or Florida and Alabama to be able to compete with what Georgia and Alabama are doing right now." So that's almost like the white flag of surrender being waved by one Auburn fan on the 24/7 Sports Auburn message board. Almost that white flag of surrender that when Georgia's bringing in a Justin Fields, when it's bringing in a Jamari Salyer, when it's bringing in a Brenton Cox, when it's bringing in a Cade Mays, when it's bringing in all those kinds of names, getting literally everyone it wants from around college football, Auburn fans saying, hey, maybe we just need to go start recruiting in some other states if we want to be able to have some success here against Georgia in the future. But wait, that's not all, because it's not just fans talking this way. I thought that Chris Kirschner had a really interesting blurb at SECCountry.com, going back to the big surprise from last night, Georgia flipping Nadab Joseph, the cornerback away from Alabama, and Alabama's in full spin control mode now. Kirschner getting a quote here. He says that Nadab Joseph wasn't sent a letter of intent today by Alabama, according to a person close to the program. He couldn't sign with the Tide. I haven't been told the reason for why he wasn't given one. There could be multiple reasons. His grades aren't up to par, or Bama may feel like they have some better options out there, like five-star cornerbacks Tyson Campbell, Patrick Surtain, Isaac Taylor Stewart. So you have Chris Kirschner, who's reported that I really like. He's a good friend of ours here on DawgNation Daily, with a source close to Alabama on this, saying Alabama, upon losing Nadab Joseph to Georgia, that's okay. We didn't want this guy anyway, which if you want evidence that Alabama is shook, to use the phrase I guess the kids use from time to time, if you want evidence of that, look no further than the fact that they have to sort of leak it out there that they didn't want Nadab Joseph to kind of save face on what was a day in which Georgia dominated Alabama head-to-head for Joseph, head-to-head for Brenton Cox, and maybe a few more before it's all said and done. We'll obviously spend a lot of time talking about that here coming up over the next couple of days. Tennessee fans obviously upset about losing Cade Mays to Georgia, the elite five-star offensive lineman. And while I would never, ever, ever condone or endorse some of the negative backlash to the recruits themselves, I think that's in poor taste, whether it be a Tennessee fan that does it to Cade Mays or if a Georgia fan were ever to do that to another recruit. I think that's in poor taste. some of what those folks were saying to Cade Mays on Twitter is an example of just how devastated they are by the success that Georgia's not only had around the South, but in their own hometown of Knoxville, Tennessee, with a legacy product like Cade Mays. Here is one of the few tweets I could put on our screen if you're watching us on Facebook Live that sort of fit for video, that sort of fit for our audience. Some of these were in such poor taste and profanity-laden that I wouldn't even dare touch them. I wouldn't even dare read them. But someone with the Twitter handle of @VolsAllDay2017, and the Twitter name is simply GBO, which obviously stands for Go Big Orange. He writes that he, meaning Cade Mays, grew up in Knoxville, a huge Vol fan, was committed for like 3 years, and then let lying Lyle Jones, and Tennessee fans for a while have been calling Butch Jones Lyle Jones, which is his given first name, let lying Lyle Jones kind of run him out of town. So really funny example of another Tennessee fan, another SEC fan, obviously just devastated by the big-time class that Georgia put together. But Knoxville, Tennessee was not the only town yesterday in the SEC that saw one of its hometown kids leave that place to come to Georgia. You also, later in the evening, in one of the most exciting moments of the entire day for the Dogs, you saw Channing Tindall, the linebacker from Columbia, South Carolina. He spurns South Carolina, chooses Georgia on something else that I think could be classified as kind of a signing day surprise, and South Carolina fans were also up in arms on that. They go to one of their message boards. This, I believe, was also the 24/7 Sports message board. One of the South Carolina fans writing about why would Tindall choose Georgia and why are Georgia fans so excited about the upcoming season, the future of the program, saying that they lose 2 of their top 5 rushers in school history. Their left tackle, top wide receiver, tight end, great blocking fullback, about 8 starters on defense. They're all gone, he says. And they think they're going to be better next year than they are this year. It's a joke. And yet if it's a joke that Georgia's going to be better in 2018 and far better than that in 2019, 2020, why aren't very many of Georgia's rival fan bases laughing right now? I think they know that the league may have been kind of put on notice here by what Georgia did, in addition to being in the Rose Bowl and the college football playoff. The real emphatic statement that Georgia makes on signing day is the kind of thing that Dog fans have been waiting for forever, and opposing fan bases have been fearing forever, that Georgia might actually do sort of the stuff that was thought to be possible for this program. I mean, for a long time, Georgia's been kind of called one of these sleeping giants. I love what one of my friends said on Twitter yesterday, that the giant is now fully awake. It is now fully operational, if you want to use a Star Wars type phrase, and that's definitely the situation here for the Georgia Bulldogs. And Dog fans are obviously reveling in every step of this and every moment of this, and here on DawgNation Daily, we are no different. I loved what Kirby Smart said about this yesterday, too, by the way, about how this class kind of came together. Maybe a little different than some classes that were truly sort of, held together by a real strong leader, some individual presence, like a Richard LeCount, somebody like that. This was more about a lot of different folks just seeing the obviously rising tides here at Georgia, and a lot of folks deciding they really like what the future looks like for UGA. Here's Kirby Smart on that.
I think the university sold itself. I obviously think that our momentum on the field, there were numerous kids that when we recruited them in the summer, they said, Coach, I really want to come to Georgia. I just want to know that we're going to play for championships and that it's going to be special. And the year that we had kind of created some momentum and tidal wave effect to bring in some extra guys.
Yeah, listen, Kirby Smart's not giving himself enough credit there for kind of creating the atmosphere that these players, these recruits want to be a part of, but obviously he's going to be humble there in the public spotlight. But the overall tone of what he says, I believe, is completely true. I mean, if you're watching some video, we just showed you some images of Georgia in the SEC championship of, you've got all that gear in the stores right now. The coaches are wearing this. They're, they've got their regular Georgia sweats and pullovers, but they've also got the Rose Bowl insignia on the side. I mean, listen, right now we are at a time when that Georgia logo, the imagery surrounding Georgia is as fashionable and good looking as it's ever been. Recruits are noticing that. That's when the Dogs pulled the haul they do yesterday, and it's why a lot of people think before February there could be a lot more to come. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us, whether you're watching us on video at 10 a.m. on Facebook Live, listening to us on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or checking us out in podcast form. Listen, we try to make that easy for you to find. iTunes, SoundCloud. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. The podcast is the kind of thing that you can listen to anywhere in the world, any time of the night or day, and I love hearing from folks all around the country, all around the world that do check out DawgNation Daily. That's always an exciting thing to see, and this is one of those days when we kind of all come together here and look back on what Georgia has done over the last 24 hours as the start of the early signing period has sort of gotten going here, and you see a tremendous haul for the Georgia Bulldogs. We're obviously enjoying that. We're also thinking about the Rose Bowl as well. Rose Bowl coming up here, really just January 1st. It's getting closer and closer to getting here. Georgia's on the practice field preparing for that right now, and one of the things that we're going to be doing each day here on DawgNation Daily is taking a look at those preparations, how Georgia gets ready to beat the Oklahoma Sooners on January the 1st. We're calling it Simply Smarter Game Planning. It's brought to you by Aldi, the home of Simply Smarter Shopping, and one of the things that makes those Georgia practices go a little bit better for Georgia right now is the fact that right now Georgia on the practice field has an extra body. Did you see this? That one of the members of Georgia's 2018 class already practiced with Georgia yesterday. I'm talking about the defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt, who was originally supposed to be a member of the 2017 class, but now academic issues all cleared up. He'll be ready to go for Georgia in the class of 2018 and already out there practicing and providing one more sort of competitive body and one more talented football player to make sure that Georgia's putting all of its top efforts together for the Rose Bowl. It's our Simply Smarter Game Planning, brought to you by Aldi, the home of Simply Smarter Shopping, and make sure you discover those sweet deals at Aldi. All your favorite holiday treats to make your holiday season all that much better. Simply Smarter Shopping can be found at your local Aldi. All right, I've got some great news for you. Coming up today, as a sort of a special sort of DawgNation daily surprise, normally Jeff Sentell does not come on this show on Thursdays. That's not one of his typical days to be on the program. But so many of you had reached out to me and said, hey, you got to have Jeff on Thursday. You've got to have Jeff on Thursday. We've got to have that sort of immediate reaction to what Georgia does with its 2018 signing class. So in a couple minutes, we will bring on Jeff Sentell, as sort of a special signing day after type surprise here to react to the signing class of the Georgia Bulldogs. And speaking of that word surprise, that was kind of the word of the day yesterday because of what Jeff had said, that he was expecting to see a signing day surprise from Georgia, in addition to the big haul that the Dogs were going to bring in. We said here on DawgNation Daily that whatever Jeff meant by surprise, I didn't think it was Brenton Cox because at least half my audience thought he was probably coming to Georgia. I didn't think it was Cade Mays because at least half my audience thought Mays was coming to Georgia, even when a lot of the Clemson writers were still picking him to go to Clemson. A lot of our audience already thought it was going to be Mays for Georgia. Virtually, 95, 100% of my audience almost thought it was going to be that Jamari Salyer would come to Georgia. That wouldn't be the surprise. So what was the surprise? Well, as a lead into this, I think it's worth kind of pointing out here that when Kirby Smart spoke to the media yesterday of what Georgia had done with its signing class, Georgia was not yet done with the day. When he talked, there really was no surprise yet. When Kirby Smart talked to the media yesterday, the news that would come later on the evening kind of hadn't unfolded as of yet. We knew about Brenton Cox. We knew about Cade Mays. We knew about Jamari Salyer. We knew about those additions to the class. But we'd found out about Devon Wilson, but we didn't know what was yet to come. But Kirby Smart said then, though, that Georgia was not done. It was still going to keep working. He meant January, but he could have also meant Wednesday night as well. Here's Kirby Smart.
There's still spots left, and I think you're always recruiting. I mean, we're going to be trying to recruit the rest of the spots, and there's going to be some really, really probably intense battles come January because the guys that are left are targeted by all the top programs. So there's going to be some guys out there that we still go after. So it's not like you can say, okay, relax, we're done, because that's not the case. We got work to do in recruiting.
Yeah, not done before February, not even done for Wednesday night, because Nadab Joseph does flip from Alabama to Georgia in what I think it can absolutely be classified as a major signing day surprise. Was that the official surprise that Jeff Sentell was talking about? Well, we'll ask him about that in just a moment when he joins us. But the one thing I think that Jeff's going to say is, based on some of the conversations I've had with him, is if you just look at the build-up to what was going to happen on Wednesday, you saw a lot of examples of more than just the names we were all expecting. And some of this, by the way, y'all are following on the internet as well. Some of this stuff is still alive moving towards January and February, too, of guys that weren't necessarily thought of as Georgia guys. They're, in some cases, even commits to other programs. But there was that late movement, that late action. And Jeff Sentell, I think, is going to say to us in a moment, there was just enough examples of that to know that in addition to all the five-star names that a lot of Georgia fans were expecting, hoping for, there was going to be somebody else added to that list. Nadab Joseph obviously provides an example of that. I think that Channing Tindall provides that as well, both in terms of the fact that Tindall does come to Georgia. Some people, I guess, had him going other places, and that he does it yesterday as opposed to maybe waiting a little longer. I think that also classifies as a surprise as well. And it just goes to show you that Kirby Smart is in an era right now in which, and I heard so much of this on Twitter, and it's even true for me, he is in an era, in a moment right now where he can satisfy even the greediest of Georgia fans. The Georgia fan who wants all the 5 stars and then some more. Well, Kirby Smart can provide some recruiting goodies here that are surprises even for people that expect to get the entire board and essentially sweep the South in terms of the top overall prospects. So it's quite a time to be a Georgia fan, quite a class that Georgia has put together. Let's find out a little bit more about that in depth right now, as on a special guest situation on a Thursday, we welcome in Jeff Sentell here to DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And Jeff Sentell does join us here, and y'all don't realize just how many miles Jeff has covered here over the last 72 hours or so, and how many words he's written at DawgNation.com, and how many interview appearances he's made with me over the course of the last few days as well. I guess this will make our 3rd interview together in the last 3 days. So, Jeff, certainly burning the candle at both ends. So, in all sincerity, Jeff, let me say thanks for taking a little extra time to be with us here today. It is truly something you did not have to do, but we are glad to get a few minutes of your time here and to borrow your expertise here for a couple of minutes. How you doing?
Hey, Brandon, man, I'm good. I'm trying not to sound like Kirby Smart after a practice or something like that. I guess we'll call this another surprise, Brandon. Jeff showing up on a Thursday, but man, I tell you what, I pull in my car in my garage last night, probably 10 o'clock. I'm like driving around, and I'm like, my phone pings, and I'm yep, got to write that now. And it's almost like I'm coming back from a pilgrimage or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I totally understand, and I was thinking, you with us? Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I finally get home, man, and I look at my phone, and it's at 1%. I look at my laptop, it's already gone. It blinked out on the way home. I look at my external batteries, both of them that supply backup to my phone as I drive around. Both of those were tanked. It felt like my left eye was going under a protest, and it was saying, "Hey, dude, how about some sleep?" But that's what we do when you write about this juggernaut recruiting class and this program that has all the momentum in the world right now.
Well, I wish you could have seen the comment section on AT&T SEC Country Live yesterday afternoon, which is a show on the SEC Country Facebook page, not DawgNation, a show that's not devoted exclusively to Georgia. It's a show that's sort of dealing with all the SEC. But the comment section, and Michael can attest to this because he was with us on the show yesterday, one of our producers, the comment section, like every other comment was, what's Jeff's surprise going to be? What's Jeff's surprise going to be? What's Jeff's surprise going to be? And I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Jeff Sentell is going to kill me for turning this into such a, or allowing this to kind of turn into such a talking point, because every message board have been talking about the notion of a surprise. All of our comment sections here on Facebook Live have been talking about those notions of surprises. And by the time the day is done, Jeff, just like you predicted, there were numerous examples of Georgia doing even more than I think that most fans, even the greediest of fans, a lot of my audience, just like me, we have a tendency to be a little greedy about this kind of stuff. But even for the greediest of Georgia recruiting observers, there were even surprises added to the mix last night, like Nadab Joseph, like Channing Tindall kind of capping off the night. It was that kind of night for Georgia, was it not?
It was, and Brandon, you know me, I know we do a lot of public appearances, and I do a lot more analysis media than maybe a lot of my old school roots as a reporter had kind of led me to be. But I'm never going to be a look at me guy, look what I did, but or look what we did. But it was always very funny to me during the course of that day. And I'm in sports and social, and I'm trying to do my job, and I had some good friends there that wanted to be a part of the moment, and I'm bouncing around trying to take pictures and do my job and write, and I'm getting tapped on the shoulder by really nice people, and I'm just trying, and they're all asking the same thing, and I was like, and sometimes I was just like, everybody was very nice, but sometimes I was like, I let the cat out a couple of times when I said, it will be the end of the day. Wait till the end of the day. And that's and so everybody 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and it's funny how what people define as surprises, because you look at it, and I think you said greedy about the audience or something like that. But okay, if I look back at a lot of things that happened yesterday, the surprise meter would hit off pretty certain. And, like, for instance, that was our first commitment video that we've ever done on the early signing day. We did a totally different commitment video with Jamari. I think we had the first public as a commitment interview with Jamari that went on site shortly after his decision in the Intel blog. The news about Justin Fields was definitely very interesting about how we have kind of the first on-the-record comments regarding his likeliness to enroll early and the leaning of the Fields camp to enroll early. And then you just keep going down the line with Channing. That decision that accelerated rapidly. Devon Wilson, I guess nobody considered him a surprise. Georgia signed six 5-stars in a day, and everybody was basically like it's the order on your Kroger click list, and you already had that coming, so everybody knew what was going on there. So it just keeps. It's an insatiable appetite. That's one thing our little surprise experiment has discovered here, and the things of the matter are is there were a couple of things that could have came down the tracks as well that didn't, for reasons I will keep close to the vest for some time. But that's a lot of stuff going on, and I guess it should be how people look at a Christmas tree, and there's so many ways people can define Christmas to them. Well, I guess a lot of folks can look at early signing day and say that was what I felt the surprise was with how they viewed Georgia recruiting.
Yeah, and it's so true, and I want to talk about so much of what you just said there, but a couple quick things here in terms of the notion of a surprise. I mean, if you want to know what the mindset of Georgia fans right now is, you have to look no further than just this idea. Because on our show we said Cade Mays would not have been a surprise to Georgia fans, despite the fact that, how many of the last 10 crystal ball predictions for Mays, I guess, had been to Clemson leading into yesterday, and yet Georgia fans were not going to be surprised by Mays coming to Georgia, despite the fact that a lot of the national media had Mays ending up there wearing the orange. Brenton Cox would not have been a surprise for Georgia fans yesterday, despite this, Jeff, that the last day, I guess, before the weekend of last weekend, you had Nick Saban in Stockbridge High School doing a face-to-face visit with Brenton Cox. You had the report from SEC Country that Brenton Cox was the recruit who was with Saban when he found out that he was going to be in the college football playoff. You had that kind of personal attention from Saban to Brenton Cox, and Georgia fans don't treat it as a surprise that he chose Georgia yesterday in a head-to-head battle over Alabama. That's setting the bar pretty high for what a surprise would even be, when most Georgia fans would say Cade Mays and Brenton Cox wouldn't have counted as the surprise.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we were talking, I think that was Tuesday at Marlowe's Tavern in Emory Point. That seems like such a long time ago. But we were talking even before our shows with the crowd there. And I think Georgia's at the point now where, and another thing that comes to mind is the news about Devontae Wyatt practicing with the team finally came out yesterday as well. But and that was no longer even a signee situation. But the other thing there is, I think, and one of our great friends of the show, friends of everything we do, very special people to all of us here at DawgNation, she had the suggestion that it was like, it's got to be Roquan Smith. He's going to announce that he's coming back for his senior year on signing day. And that's the surprise. And God bless them, our viewers and the DawgNation populace as a whole, they're starting to get pretty Tiffany taste about what qualifies as a surprise right now.
That is very true. Hey, you mentioned the Jamari Salyer video, and I hope people had a chance to see what Salyer did in a concert here with our friends at Kroger, and of course Diehards, our sister site, who kind of helps put all this stuff together. Tell me about the concept of the video, kind of how it came together. We were having a great time on the show yesterday. By the way, Jeff, our buddy Michael, one of our producers, had never seen the Suge Knight Source Award speech. He enjoyed seeing that kind of the first time yesterday and kind of getting some of the backstory about, some of the stuff that was in there. Give me an idea kind of how that concept kind of came to be in terms of how Jamari Salyer wanted to sort of explain to the world who he was and why he was choosing Georgia.
Well, first of all, there's not going to be a flurry of commitments today. There's not going to be a flurry unless Georgia starts stacking up 2019s and 2020s. Funny story, there was some chatter last night about 2019s wanting to go ahead and join up on that day as well. And I don't know if the staff told them to stand down or whatever, but so So first of all, homework for DawgNation today. I want you to hit Google, or YouTube especially, and I want you to do a web search for the the 1995 Source Awards, or Suge Knight, Puff Daddy Source Awards. Those are your search terms. And I want you to watch that video. And me, being a guy who had the Above the Rim soundtrack bumping in my car back in those days, I'm a big fan of all things hip-hop, that culture, and everything else like that. So what this originated from, and it became what I kind of look at as a "We Want You" poster, where Jamari Salyer is acting Jamari Salyer is acting sort of as a Uncle Sam type. We want you to simply come to Georgia. That was what we wanted his video to kind of look like, his decision video to look like. And members of Jamari's circle, especially a gentleman very close to him, came up with the concept. Jamari loved it. They brought it to me. I immediately was doing, fist pumps about the whole situation. And I went through that, and I knew most of that Suge speech. Obviously, he's in the red shirt. Hope you guys catch the beginnings of the video where it's a young Jamari Salyer watching television. And you see a little bitty clip of Suge Knight at the Source Awards while that's going on. And that was one of our Easter eggs we kind of planted to make sure that folks will get it. I love the way we were able to weave in his actual personal story. Jamari and I have been talking for many months now about what his commitment video would look like. And my request was it simply had to have that integrity storyline in there. We meshed it up with the Suge Knight stuff. And I will say this, one of the most fun things I've had writing for DawgNation, probably in my almost 3 years here now, was taking what Suge Knight said about Puff Daddy and producers in the video and dancing in the video and listening to records and everything else like that, and kind of Georgifying it, so to speak, to make it fit how Jamari felt, how Mr. Salyer felt about becoming a Georgia Bulldog. And we also are going to have, it might not be today, might be tomorrow, but we also have kind of like a director's cut of one of those versions of that video. Might not be a full cut. It might just be a really cool line. But I think dog fans will get a kick out of that as well. So remember, YouTube, Suge Knight, Source Awards, watch it, and then you'll have a little bit of the backstory about why we went with Jamari and the mic drop moment for the class of 2018. And I think by the time Channing Tindall came down the tracks last night, I think that was definitely the mic drop for at least the first day of the early signing period for Georgia.
Yeah, listen, I loved what Laura Woodard, great comment in the comment section. She says, I knew the Suge Knight speech. She says, I feel both hip and old. And there's an extent to which I agree with Laura. I kind of felt the same way on that regard, both hip and old, that I, at least cool enough to have seen the speech before, but maybe old enough that I had to explain it to some younger people what it actually was. But, I have to admit, Jeff, and with all due respect to Richard LeCount, Jake Fromm, and Nate McBride, J.J. Holloman, Malik Herring, I think that Jamari's the best actor of any of the recruits that we've done commitment videos for. I think Jamari's speech there at the end gives him the Oscar in terms of acting performances in any of our commitment videos. Do you agree with that?
Well, here's simple feedback. There's some guys that definitely in our productions, you just slap them on the back, you smile, and you say, man, good thing you're a football player. You're not ready for Hollywood yet. And then there's a guy like Jamari, who you give him a concept, you feed him a line, he nails the line the first time, probably 80%. He does it again, it gets to 90-95%. And then normally in the production business, you want to do one more for safety. And he elevates it every time. That commanding presence with everything you see there with Jamari, and kind of how he handles that role of the Suge of we're going to talk about Pied Pipers of classes. Well, you can just call Jamari the Suge of Georgia's recruiting for 2018, because I think, and I put in the blog, lot of work he did there working on Cade Mays. I think that relationship was invaluable. Also very invaluable how Pittman was also working on Cade Mays even prior to the first embers of the dumpster fire in Knoxville. Let's say that the nice way as we can. And there was some backstory there. I'd never ever believed the noise with Clemson simply because I knew for a fact that he had never been to a camp at Clemson, so nobody really had a lead anywhere on Cade Mays whatsoever. And you also knew that Cade Mays was going to, once he finally took that official visit to Georgia, he was going to mesh very well with that hunting crew that went out on the Sunday. And that's not Jamari, but that's Ben Cleveland, that's Jake Fromm, and also Charlie Warner. That's a good group of guys, and Cade Mays is definitely going to fit right in with those gentlemen.
All right, I told you when I asked you to come on the show today that I wouldn't keep you long, and now I'm going over with you, and I'll try to wrap this up quickly so you can get back to what you're doing before you came on the show with us. But I do have to admit one thing before I ask you one final question. Now you've got people stirred up in the comment section again. John Arena noticing what you have mentioned here a couple times, day one of the early signing period. A lot of our audience takes that as a cue to be ear to the ground here for day 2 and day 3. The signing period does extend through Friday, of course. I mean, as a reporter or as an advisor to Dog fans here, you paying attention for more stuff to come for Georgia before Friday closes? Or you think the Dogs kind of finished off its early signing period performance on Wednesday?
Well, that's a great question, and I guess the best way I can say that is never say never, especially with this class. The whole storyline there with Nadab is very interesting. Georgia had kind of been his number 2 for a while, but very good source has let us know that apparently Alabama never sent him his papers to make that decision. So it was going to be very interesting going down the decision timeline there for Mr. Joseph. Lots of relationships there also with Mr. Joseph and a lot of key members of the Georgia staff. But I think if anything happens today or tomorrow, it might be a simple momentum commitment where a player just decides, what am I looking around for? It seems like the number 1 team is recruiting me, and I might as well go ahead and just make it official. But Right now, as of 10:33 a.m. on Thursday, I would not expect Georgia to stack up 2 or 3 more signees and fill out the class. I think if you look at the defensive tackle spot, still no public declaration by Jordan Davis about what he's going to do. That official, last I checked, has not been received by Georgia, that LOI. So that's very interesting maneuverings at the defensive tackle spot, while Devontae Wyatt may be already there and practicing with the team. Tramel Walthor also chose not to sign early. So everybody's going to start thinking about Rick Sandage a little bit more. Robert Cooper, that ship sailed last week. I know I broke your heart about that on Tuesday.
Yeah, I liked Cooper. I always liked Cooper.
Christian Barmore also signs with Alabama. So to me, names to think about, you've got wide receiver Tommy Bush. You've got tight end Luke Ford. You've got the 2 cornerbacks, Isaac Taylor-Stewart and Tyson Campbell. That's about where Georgia's going to go. Also, there's the decision by Quay Walker. Cannot forget Quay Walker. Quay Walker was also in that chatter pipeline over the last 4 or 5 days about stuff that could potentially happen for Georgia.
Yep.
So I think I wrote a week and a half ago or maybe Georgia was likely to get 4, 5, 6 5-stars, but also Georgia is going to enter into the old school signing period in January, only chasing about 4 names. And that's what it looks like right now.
So let me finish with this, Jeff, and I do appreciate your time here today. Georgia's going to make a strong push here for the number 1 class, and I guess finish with December with the composite number 1 in all likelihood, I guess. I mean, what's the big takeaway from you about the day? Is it the relationship that Cade Mays built quickly with guys like Jake Fromm and Charlie Warner, Ben Cleveland, his hunting buddies there? Is it, Brenton Cox, who obviously likes the momentum that Georgia's building, and that was enough for him to want to flip from Ohio State, say no to Nick Saban. I mean, what's your sort of big takeaway overall from what the day ended up being for Georgia?
Well, I guess the big takeaway from me, and there's a couple stories we still need to write, especially when we start doing that review coverage of the class. But to me, it's simply this. Everybody has always pointed to Georgia as the everyone has always pointed to Georgia as the school that always picks up the skill guys. Running back you, sometimes people say tight end you. But now, when all those boys get onto the campus, you're going to start looking at the roster, especially 2018, 2019, and you're going to start thinking, is Georgia have more depth on the interior offensive line, running back, the edge spot at defensive end, outside linebacker? And I'm not talking about just numbers, like Georgia signed 7 defensive backs last year. I'm talking about great googly-moogly, lot of Sunday players, a lot of future all-SEC players, a lot of wow guys when you see them on the practice fields. Georgia is just amassing, and the word is amassing. Throw quarterback in there as well. Georgia is just amassing a bulletproof depth chart in terms of they can sustain an injury through the physical game of football, and then the guys that are the next men up are going to be pretty stinking good.
Yeah, Jeff, that is so well said. And I got to tell you, and I know you hear this, and I hope you hear it in sincerity from us. We've loved your coverage, man, and we have a good time reading it. I'm privileged to get a chance to talk to you, whether it's at Marlowe's or here on DawgNation Daily. You have certainly made a lot of fun for us, and those of us that love kind of riding this train every single day, it's great to see the twists and turns. And you covered a lot of ground for us yesterday. You wrote a lot of posts, and it was a great way to keep up with the start of early signing period. Thanks for squeezing in some extra time for us here today on DawgNation Daily as well.
Hey, Brandon, you got it. And, hey, folks, that was amazing. I don't think you guys should think that happens every time. That's like a 59 in golf by somebody on the tour. Probably can be stated as the greatest single signing day in Georgia history.
Yeah, well said, Jeff. We'll talk to you soon.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, single best day in Georgia signing history, probably so. One of the best days that any SEC team's ever had on an individual day. I think that may be true as well, at least based on what some of the national recruiting analysts are saying here. And, it just lays a tremendous foundation for what's to come for Georgia. We've obviously got days to talk about both, what we really like about the class and maybe where Georgia's going next. I guess I'd squeeze in one quick opinion before the SEC Through starts. The individual name I may be the most excited about right now from what happened yesterday, even though, I've been a big fan of Brenton Cox now for a while, but he's not the name I'm going to mention here. It's actually probably going to be Channing Tindall that I mentioned here because it seems like Georgia has an intention to play Tindall as an inside linebacker maybe, and he's one of those guys, along with what Owen Popo might be for Georgia's 2019 class, who sort of play that Roquan position maybe in the future, and I know that's giving a lot to Tindall very early in his career to say, hey, you're the next Roquan Smith. Good luck with that. Go out there and get that done. That's asking a lot from him. That's putting a pretty big declaration on his head by even suggesting that. I'm not trying to be unfair to Channing Tindall here. I want him to let his career play out, let him carve his own path here. But some of that dynamic athleticism that Roquan Smith has shown, that will be absent from Georgia next season with him moving on to the NFL, which I expect him to do. And I don't know that a player on the current roster, with all due respect to some of those linebackers, and many of those are fan favorites with many of y'all, I don't know that anyone quite brings that profile to the table in the same package that Roquan does. I believe that Channing Tindall's close to that, though. He'll only be a freshman. I don't know that he does a lot of that in 2018, but he does have some of that kind of athleticism for the future. That's one of the reasons why I'm very excited about Tindall's addition to this class. Before we do our SEC Through, I'll also remind you the DawgNation Daily brought to you in part today by our friends at Kroger. And right now, Kroger, it actually started yesterday, continues through January the 2nd, the Holiday Seafood Roadshow. Some great deals on some terrific seafood, like buy one, get one free lobster tail when you use the card, Alaskan king crab legs, $24.99 a pound, colossal cooked shrimp, also $12.99 a pound, jumbo Gulf shrimp, $9.99 per pound. Key West pink shrimp, $9.99 a pound. All when you use the card, including, by the way, if you've got a great holiday party. How about the Kroger shrimp tray, just $8.99 each, also when you use the card. Really unbelievable deals for the Holiday Seafood Roadshow. And there's no better way to kind of sort of take your holiday party up to the next level with a really cool, seafood tray, seafood platters, shrimp. Listen, everybody likes shrimp. It's just a cool thing. So, Holiday Seafood Roadshow going on right now at Kroger. SEC Through here. We'll do some of the other SEC news, and of course, we'll talk more about this on AT&T SEC Country Live coming up this afternoon. Florida does sign Emory Jones yesterday. That's a big pickup for them. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Listen, I'm a Gator hater, and I don't hide that, pretend to be that, but I got to give credit where credit's due. I think that Dan Mullen rallying the way that he did to sign Emory Jones is probably a pretty good pickup for Florida. Do I put him in the same caliber of prospect as I do Justin Fields? I honestly do not. I don't see that as a way of taking a shot at Emory Jones. I just don't think he's in the same caliber of Justin Fields. If he was, Florida would have reached out to him as quickly as it reached out to Fields. Florida's top choice was obviously going to be Fields, just like everybody else's would have been. Georgia wins Fields, and Emory Jones was what's left over. And I think that Florida does a pretty good job in going in to get Emory Jones here. And I think that Jones will probably be a pretty good quarterback for Dan Mullen's system. The problem for Florida in 2018, though, is can Mullen get Jones ready in time? I don't know that he can. And if not, Florida may have a real issue at the quarterback situation. Another real issue here involves what's going on at Tennessee. And unless I'm mistaken here, all of the Tennessee media stuff yesterday was done by athletic director Philip Fulmer and not head coach Jeremy Pruitt. What is that about? I mean, I do know for a fact, I don't know that Pruitt ever did a press conference in Knoxville. Maybe he did. But like the SEC Network interview was not done by Pruitt. It was done by Philip Fulmer. And, Philip Fulmer having to explain why it's not awkward that he's speaking and Pruitt's not, that Pruitt's only the part-time coach. Tennessee did not sign a lot of guys yesterday. They're going to be off to kind of a slow start, just given the fact that Pruitt's only been on the job a little while and that Tennessee's probably got a little bit of a brand issue to deal with at the time. But it's Fulmer speaking yesterday instead of Pruitt. We'll give you some of what Fulmer had to say today on AT&T SEC Country Live. This makes you wonder kind of, when Kirby Smart took the Georgia job, he was still working part-time in Alabama, but he made a lot of public appearances as Georgia coach in that sort of December, January type month. Kind of weird that Pruitt's a little lower profile there at Tennessee. Thought that Gus Malzahn made an interesting statement. Bruce Feldman had tweeted this out yesterday, that on the SEC Network, Malzahn compared his quarterback signing for 2018, Joey Gatewood, to former Auburn Heisman Trophy winner Cam Newton. Says that Gatewood's sort of combination of athleticism and poise as a quarterback, the kind of thing that he really hasn't seen since Cam Newton. And we said yesterday that you got to be careful about stuff like this. Obviously, you want to talk up your own recruits, your signees. Every coach does that. You got to be careful making comparisons that make it sort of hard to live up to. I risked that a moment ago when I compared Channing Tindall to Roquan Smith. That's certainly asking a lot from Channing Tindall. And at Auburn, it's very much asking a lot from Joey Gatewood. Even put him in the same sort of category or sentence right now with Cam Newton. I don't think that that Malzahn necessarily meant that Gatewood's going to be the next Cam Newton, but you got to be careful with those kind of comparisons, I think, a little bit. Also, I guess there's news coming out of Arkansas that instead of Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator they were linked to, which always seemed like a pipe dream, Bo Manningly, who's a radio host out in Arkansas, tweets out that he thinks that Arkansas could be close to hiring John Chavis as its defensive coordinator. And I know that Chavis had some struggles at Texas A&M here recently. That defense never quite got going there. But, man, he had great success at LSU, and he was good at Tennessee before that. I think that if Arkansas were to bring in Chavis, I think overall that ends up being a pretty good hire for them, and the kind of thing that would give them a little bit of, Morris is a new head coach. He's kind of new to the SEC. There's maybe a lack of stability there. But bringing in a guy like Chavis who knows the SEC as well as he knows it, even if his last stop wasn't all that successful, I think that may give Arkansas some stability it very much needs. If it goes down, I would call that a good hire, and we'll make that your SEC through. As we get ready to wrap up here today, always nice to have you on the program. And listen, we're going to obviously spend a lot of time doing this, the next few days, really kind of unpacking everything that Georgia did on the start of early signing period. We'll add to that any names that kind of come in here. And then, as Jeff Sentell has sort of alluded to, we will start previewing hard those names throughout the month of January that Georgia's still going to be chasing down. And we heard Kirby Smart say this a moment ago, still chasing down some names before February. We'll talk about all of them. And, oh, yeah, by the way, in between that, we got the Rose Bowl to get ready for as well. We'll have more on that for you on tomorrow's edition of the program. But we would not be doing the DawgNation Daily if we didn't close at the show the way we always do with our Gator Hater Countdown. It may be Emory Jones for Florida. It's going to be a loaded roster for Georgia. And 310 days from right now, Georgia gives Florida another loss. It's our Gator Hater Countdown. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. Thanks for being with us today. And for those of you who are with us right now, thanks so much for being a part of the program. Also, let's get some of your comments. And it would help if I kept the comment section up. I just clicked out of it. So give me a second to get back into here. And we will kind of talk about anything you want to from the class. Now, I wanted to focus our interview with Jeff today on the guys that Georgia just brought in. A lot of our future conversations will obviously focus in on who's still left to go for Georgia and kind of who's still Georgia chasing down. And I think that, kind of keeping track of all this year is made a little bit more difficult by the nature of the early signing period coming as quickly as it does in a moment when Georgia's still got a national championship to try to win this season. I feel like all of us, me included, are going to be spending a lot of days just trying to unpack kind of where all of this leaves Georgia here. And it obviously leaves Georgia in a pretty good place, but there is still some sifting through, I think, on all of this that is still yet to be done. So we'll look forward to doing that. Let me get some comments here now. I've got these back up. Daryl Poole says, so how many spots does Georgia have left? Did Georgia sign? Was it 19 that Georgia brought in yesterday? Is that right? And some of y'all may know the number, fully better than I do. But I believe it was 19 that Georgia brought in yesterday. I think that's right. If Jordan Davis had come in, it would have made it 20. And if that be the case, it looks like Georgia may have 4 spots left. But I may have those numbers wrong just a little bit. Rita and Dano Brookshire says, where can I listen or read Oklahoma football news? Want to see what they're thinking. So we've got a great, I told you about our sister website, diehards.com. Diehards.com does cover Oklahoma. If you just go to diehards.com, click the Big 12 tab, you can get in there and see the Oklahoma coverage. One of the guys that covers Oklahoma for us here at our sister site is a guy named John Shin, who knows the Sooners really well. And coming up next week for Christmas Day, and probably a little bit on the day after Christmas as well, we're going to hear from John Shin here on DawgNation Daily. Now, I'm going to tell this to the full audience tomorrow. I'll tell you now. On Monday, which is Christmas Day, will be podcast only that day. Tuesday, the 26th, also podcast only. We will not be video on Monday or Tuesday because it's Christmas Day. On the 26th, I'm actually leaving to go to Pasadena. So no video for Monday or Tuesday. We will still have podcasts. If you watch the show, that's a great day to listen to the show because we are only available on podcast that day. But then starting on Wednesday, December 27th, we'll be doing DawgNation Daily in California, getting ready for the Rose Bowl. So we'll have Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday DawgNation Dailies from California. Special editions of the program on Saturday and Sunday. The day before, the day of the Rose Bowl, we'll have DawgNation Daily from Pasadena. And the morning after the game, we'll react to what we hope is a Georgia win from California as well. So a lot of DawgNation Daily coming your way from California here all next week. So we'll tell you all more about that. But in preparation for that, Christmas Day, travel day on the 26th, that's podcast only. And that's a sort of a long way of saying part of those podcasts, for those of you who want to know more about the Oklahoma Sooners, that will include John Shin, who covers the Sooners for diehards.com. So we'll do that. Raymond Cox says we're doing live shows somewhere from Pasadena. So we're definitely going to do live shows. I think that they're not really going to be public places, though, to be completely honest with you. And that's not because I don't want to see you or any of you. I'd love to see all of you. It's just a matter of, it's just a lot easier to kind of book a private space than a public space. A lot of times the public spaces don't have the world's greatest internet. We have, some internet capabilities, so we have to require to get the show on the air. So we're going to do the post-game show from the Rose Bowl Stadium, but that's not going to be like in the public area of the Rose Bowl Stadium. We're going to do DawgNation Daily from like a sort of a private space that I believe we've rented, but it's not a public space. If you're going to be there, though, tweet at me, tweet at Jeff on the day of the game, or really throughout the week, and let us know where you are, and maybe we'll try to come by and see as many folks as we can. Some of y'all are asking questions about Channing Tindall. If the commitment also includes a signature. That's a great question, to be honest with you. I'm still checking, chasing some of that down myself, and that may be just publicly available news that I don't know yet. But I don't know if Tindall's currently a commit or if he is a signee. But I have no reason to think that the commit will be quickly followed by a signee if it is not already. Jimmy Barnes mentions Micah Parsons trolling Georgia. I think that's probably true. I think that's what that was. In terms of the big secret surprise, as Buck Brinson puts in the comments section, Micah Parsons was never going to be that guy. I think he wanted Georgia fans to think he was going to be. I think there was, to be completely honest, some some thought in the recruiting circles that maybe Parsons was the kind of guy that you could never really nail down for sure. Maybe he was a little bit like Aubrey Solomon was last year, easily swayed by visits. Coach he talked to most recently was the coach that he favored the most. So I think a lot of the recruiting world would have told you that Parsons was a little bit unpredictable necessarily, but the most likely thing for him was that he was never going to choose Georgia, despite what he's putting on social media. And I do think in terms of guesswork on recruits, and I do that with y'all just like you do. I mean, I'm always making guesses and predictions and likely things. And one of the rules that I personally try to follow is that Twitter is not necessarily a predictor of what's going to happen or Instagram, or in this case, I guess it was also Snapchat. Those social medias are not going to be strong predictors of behavior. You had Emory Jones congratulating Ohio State commits all the way up to the point when he flipped to Florida. You've got Trey Hill being happy that Auburn, at least seemingly happy that Auburn beat Georgia back in November, and he was, I think, all dog the entire time. You've got these moments in which the publicly available information may sort of lead you in one direction, but a lot of that times that stuff is just false positives. And Micah Parsons, was he intentionally trying to confuse Georgia fans, or intentionally trying to use the word that you use, troll? I won't pretend to know his motives, but in this case, the large presence of Georgia logos showing up on Parsons' social media were certainly not a predictor for him. D.L. Sutton says that he read that Tyndall faxed it in, or that may have been Nadab Joseph. Yeah, the truth is, I mean, a lot of this stuff's going to be sifted out over the course of the next couple of days. Maurice Carter says this class that Georgia signed is of epic proportions, and it truly is. And here's where, my natural tendency probably works against me here a little bit, because y'all know, I mean, I talk for a living. I have a tendency to, probably hype things up from time to time. I don't mind admitting to that I'm probably a little given from time to time towards hyperbole. But this is the kind of class that sort of defies hyperbole. It's the kind of class that sort of defies the sort of typical normal hype. Someone like me who, would sound like a carnival barker from time to time. This is the kind of class that's actually worthy of that. This is the kind of thing, and I started the show by kind of mocking some of the other fan bases, but it's really what the national media and what the fan bases outside of Georgia are saying that really indicates just how strong this really is. It's the oh wow, it's the how is this happening? It's the are you serious? I love what some people were saying on the on Twitter yesterday about how, by the end of the day, Kirby Smart was just running up the score. I mean, it really was well beyond the point of, wow, what Georgia's done is impressive. Kirby's still adding like multiple players. I mean, it was really something to watch. Dustin Kozar says, great job keeping it secret. Listen, I'm not good at keeping secrets. I don't know a lot of this stuff. Part of that is, I've joked before that Jeff keeps a lot of stuff from me that he may know, because he knows the first thing I'm going to do. I mean, I spend all my life here in this studio in front of this microphone, in the morning and the afternoon. If I know a secret, I'm going to tell y'all. I'm going to tell you what I know. Or at least I'm going to do my best to be able to tell you, what I know. Some of the political backstory stuff I may not be interesting enough to bring up from time to time on some of this kind of thing. But, so, I mean, I was sort of I have strong opinions like many of y'all do. I won't deny that, and I feel like some of those opinions are based on what I think, pretty convincing evidence. So I won't pretend that I'm not making what I think are educated guesses on a lot of these guys based on what I may have heard. But in terms of me personally keeping things a secret, luckily I don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. I do this show on video. Y'all could tell my face. You could tell me if I was lying. DeMayer says he'll play poker with me any day. I'm telling y'all, I don't know what y'all think I know sometimes. I wish I did. Trust me, I wish that I did. Yulye Yursall says that Georgia's got 2 wide receiver commits for 2019. And I do think that Hazelwood and Blaylock did shape the way that Georgia recruited wide receivers for 2018 as well. I think you're right about that, if that comes up as a topic. Maurice Carter says, out of these last 2 classes Georgia has signed with the number 1 overall class for 2019, how many national championships do you think Georgia will play in or win? I mean, this is where my tendency to hype may, discredit what I'm about to say, but I think the kind of recruiting work that Georgia has done here, both in 2017, 2018, what 2019 is going to be, in the 2018 class not done, I do think Georgia puts itself in the position for like those multiple national championship competitions. Not saying Georgia's going to win multiple national championships, but Georgia not going away for these, for those kinds of spots anytime soon. Because, look, I follow the numbers in this pretty closely, and I love what a lot of people have been saying on message boards lately. That the dumbest thing people say about Georgia on a day like this is, well, recruiting's never been the problem at UGA. Georgia's recruited fine before. In other words, making the suggestion that what Georgia's doing right now is not dramatically different from what it's done in the past. And the reason why other people say that is because they like thinking that Georgia has failed to live up to its expectations before when it had really good classes. That is just bad analysis here, because the typical class for Georgia in the past was something in the neighborhood of 10 or 11 or 12 4- and 5-star players in the course of a class. But what Georgia's doing right now, and some of y'all know the overall numbers, and this probably better than I do, but it was close to 20 last year. It's going to be 20-ish, I guess, again this year. And you're building towards what Alabama has had, and this is one of those moments when you've got to call Alabama what it is. It has been a juggernaut. About 3/4 of that roster, literally 75% of the players on Alabama's 85 scholarships are former 4- and 5-star players coming out of high school. Ohio State's close to that. That's why those teams always sort of show up in that playoff national championship conversation, because if somebody gets hurt, it's a 4- or a 5-star guy that comes in and replaces him. It's that maximizing every roster spot, every position group. And a team that's in the top 10 of recruiting is just not good enough. I mean, there's a huge difference between being third, which what Georgia was last year, and being eighth, was what Georgia was in the past. Third and eighth may not sound that different in terms of the overall chronological number order, but in terms of if you made a graph or a chart, third's way up here in terms of total 4- and 5-star players. Eighth is way down here. I mean, it's what do you call it? A long tail. I think the data folks will tell you it's a long tail. I mean, the top 3 classes in America signed the overwhelming number of 4- and 5-star guys, and then it drops off the table, and then it becomes basically a flat line the rest of the way in terms of other teams signing 4- and 5-star guys. It's the top 3 classes that hoard all of this talent. So I think the national championships are won by the teams that collect multiple years' worth of top 3 classes. Top 1, top 2 classes, even better probably, and that is what Georgia's doing right now. James Waddell says Tyndall wasn't a surprise. I mean, listen, I know there was a lot of chatter about Tyndall coming to Georgia, but announcing yesterday, does that not count as a little bit of a surprise? C.R. Brown says, been a Dog fan for a very long time now, ever since my father introduced me to football early in my life. Now my dad was given 6 months to live, and he would like to see the national championship before he goes. That would be so wonderful to me and him. And C.R., that's a really nice thing to share. Thanks for bringing us into what's going on with your family there. And I hope that Georgia gets that national championship for people like you and your family. And I've heard a lot of examples of that. My grandfather was a big Georgia fan too. Of course, my whole family has been, but my grandfather in particular is the one that took me to a lot of games. And I do think from time to time, he's no longer with us, but I do think from time to time about what it would be like for him, who had taken me to so many games and loved all this stuff, and what it would be like for him to get a chance to watch the way that Georgia's playing and performing right now. I think that he'd have a blast with all that. I know that many of you are also kind of in the same boat. You think about that family member that introduced you to this sport, this team, this kind of way of life, and you think about what that person would be like, enjoying some of this now. I hear a lot of Georgia fans who say, boy, I wish Munson was here to see this. And as much fun as that would be, I think a lot of times when people say I wish Larry Munson was here to say this and see this and describe all of this, I think that's also not just a memory about Larry Munson, the legendary longtime broadcaster for Georgia, but a memory of the people that used to listen to Larry Munson with you when you were younger, who may not be with us anymore as well. So a lot of times when I think about, boy, it'd be great to hear Larry Munson call one of these games or talk about the fact that Georgia's in the Rose Bowl, for me, that's not just a Munson memory or not just a yearning to hear Munson call another game. but it's also a bit of a yearning to hear and experience all of this with the people that I used to listen to Larry Munson call games with. And so I certainly appreciate other families that feel the same way about all of that. Jeff Barnett says, to bring us back to the nuts and bolts here, what is the greatest need for Georgia that hasn't landed yet? With all due respect to Nadab Joseph, for me, it's also still that elite cover corner. I mean, I think that is really the final frontier for Georgia's recruiting classes. Those premium positions, I think of offensive tackles being a premium position. I think of cornerback as being a premium position. And, Tyson Campbell's still out there. I mean, can Georgia do that too? And that's not until February, y'all. Well, I'm going to talk about Tyson Campbell 4 million times between now and February. I just go ahead and warn you on that. But can Georgia also get a Campbell to go along with everything that's going here? That to me is the biggest need, which is no disrespect to Quay Walker and some of those guys that Georgia may also bring in. Luke Ford may bring him in. Tyson Campbell would be the big one. And that would be spiking the football about as way as it can be spiked. Eric Moody also thinking about Mike Big Dog Woods, who would be having a good time with this. And yeah, I met him, I guess it was last November. The only time I've ever met him in person was we did an event in Kroger in Athens, and he stopped by. This is like the Friday before the Auburn game. It's the Auburn game in which Georgia won against Auburn in 2016 when Auburn was ranked in the top 10. This is a beautiful Friday in Athens. He was driving a convertible. Pulled right in there to the he didn't know we were going to be there. He was just shopping. But he was shopping, already had the face paint on. For those of you that don't realize, Mike Big Dog Woods was the guy for a long time that you always saw on TV, the bald head, the Georgia logo kind of painted on his face. And on the Friday before the Auburn game in 2016, he was already painted up and ready to go. And he did pass not too long after that. His son has kind of taken on the tradition of painting his logo the same way that Big Dog did, and it was a cool thing for me to get to meet him because he does embody that great passion of Georgia fandom and did embody that for such a long time, and he would obviously be, he'd be beside himself right now. There's no question about that. All right, I got to get ready to get out of here. We're late. We're back tomorrow at 10 a.m., 3 p.m. Eastern Time for SEC Country Live presented by AT&T Today. We'll kind of talk more about how Georgia kind of fits into the rest of the picture of the SEC on that program. Thanks for being with us. We're back tomorrow live on video at 10 a.m. We'll see you then here on DawgNation Daily. Is that okay? We'll call him in about 10 or 15 minutes or so. Is that okay?